Talking about that and mainstream media and people walking away from the mainstream, let's bring in Alwyn Poole, education commentator. You would have been surprised by that, I imagine, Alwyn?
Well, I didn't know until your producer let me know about 20 minutes ago. So stunned, really.
Yeah, well, that's the end of that. Mind you, there's nothing on TV3 I watch, so it's all right. I feel okay. Can I just very quickly say, Alwyn, you have been one of the leading critics over the last 12 months to do with the Secretary of Education, Iona Halstead, who, as I remember rightly, was the previous Chief Executive of the Education Review Office. And she, when she was head of the Chief Executive Education Review Office, turned what seemed to be comprehensible reports that parents could understand about their schools into gibberish. She then went into the Ministry of Education and has been the Chief Executive, and she appeared in front of the Education and the Education something else, Manpower Committee's odd name, committee this on Monday at Parliament, giving a review of what she's done over the last years. She was asked a particular question. God, you've got a lot of new staff over the last 5 years. What are they doing? What was your reaction to the answer?
I was looking at the property thing, but what did she particularly say to that one?
Well, she just said that they had extra staff because they were doing all these new things, from sort of actually property was one of them, to IT, to giving support to teachers. And I was going, and somebody was, and the next question I never saw answered, or at least it might have been asked, but it wasn't reported, was, so how come, Iona, in the time that you've been in charge, schooling and educational standards in New Zealand, with all these additional staff, have declined?
Yeah. I think two things happened that day. I think one was actually she was finally being fairly confronted, and how on earth they have gone from 2,700 to 4,300 ministry employees in just 6 years. It is bizarre. And as you say, it's correlated with, and I'm going to say actually quite causal in some ways, because that sucks huge resource out of vote education, with a decline in every metric of our education system.
Yeah.
The second, so it was fair that she was asked that question, and it's a nonsensical response, because in business, if you want to employ someone, you do a really simple calculation, and it's always an estimate. But will this person add more to my business than they cost me? And if the answer is no, you don't employ them. If the answer is yes, you do. And it should be exactly the same. Does this new employee add to the education of children in our country or not? And if the answer is no, you don't employ them. I have no idea what they do in the ministry. I have some very good people that I know of who are in there who are deeply frustrated. But I'll be honest, they're not just frustrated with the ministry, they're frustrated with the previous two governments, and they're frustrated with the start that the new government has made, because they feel they've gone straight back to incrementalism when we need much more drive, much more leadership. But the second thing I thought that happened on Monday was that Iona Halstead was set up. And she was set up by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Education. I don't know it's the most courageous way of getting rid of her, but they had I think while the Select Committee was on, or near to it, they had a press conference where they announced this inquiry or investigation into property.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the cameras are outside the Select Committee. So when Halstead comes out, this is all thrown at her. So whether she knew it was coming at her or not, she had, again, a pretty weak answer where she said, well, a lot of this property stuff is just that sometimes the communications can be confusing. That was as much responsibility as she would take. So I think she was set up. And I'd much prefer that Erica Stanford simply went to the head of State Services and said, look, I don't have confidence in Iona or this leadership team. As you know, because we've discussed it before, the top 12 of the ministry have barely any. Iona's the only one. She has a tiny amount of actual in-school teaching experience. They don't know what they're doing.
Just going back to that, there is a sort of a rubric, in Wellington, that if you want to get rid of somebody, you probably need a little bit of evidence. I understand what you're saying, Alwyn. I don't know if I agree with you. When I wanted to get rid of our chief executive at Otago Regional Council, the way we got rid of her was to have an inquiry. And the inquiry established what we thought was true. But you never have an inquiry, just can I tell you from a political point of view, you never have an inquiry unless you know what the answer is going to be.
Oh, absolutely. And I've tried to work with the ministry property people, so it's an anecdote, but it's I understand very typical. So we had proposed a 480 student school for diverse learners in Central Auckland. The ministry, and this is the weird thing they have. So they said, well, we haven't got that in the property tunnel, whatever they call it. And I said, but under the designated character school model, you're allowed to lease. And they said, oh, we can't find any lease property. I said, give me 10 days. So I found something really good, really appropriate, didn't require any capital up front from the ministry, perfect to do it. And they just came back to the ministry, not the government, the ministry prefers to buy property and aren't interested in leasing. And I said, it's in the law. Oh, but we're not interested in leasing. And so they were looking for a purchase of a Central Auckland property that could host 480 students and all that goes with that, which...
Yeah, for what point?
It's bizarre.
Yeah. But it's exactly the same with hospitals as well. Why wouldn't you let the private sector build them and then you just simply lease them? And then you can adapt. I mean, but it's true of central and local government. They have to own everything. No, they don't. You can rent them, and certainly in a commercial environment, that's the smarter course of action. Now, just next one, though. You must... I haven't heard a lot from Erica. I did have the head of the Principals Federation on the show earlier this week, and he said they have got no difficulty with cell phone policy. They've got no difficulty with teaching an hour a day. They do it already. They said most good schools would. But they are desperate to get a common curriculum for reading, writing and arithmetic in this country. Is that the next place they've got to go, and is work progressing as quickly as it should in that area?
Well, it will take a long time. I mean, you're talking in terms of getting a curriculum written, and in terms of then implementing it, doing all of the professional development, all of the stuff that the unions will demand, extra hours, more teacher-only days, all this kind of stuff. You're probably talking, if we do it the traditional way, 2 or 3 years down the track. If we fast track that, and one way I think so, there's an advisory group that Eric has put together. They've got some very good people on it. But one of the things I think that they should be looking at is the very best, almost off-the-shelf curriculums from around the world.
Yeah. If you had to pick a country that is doing things pretty damn good and we could follow with profit, what would that country be, Owen?
Well, I think you'd have a good look at the top of the piece of countries, which, you've got some of the European countries that fit there. You then look at the kind of, by cultural, I mean, we have a system that's very much Western-based.